What's up, passionate Pokemon players? I am Ryan, and we're here for another episode of the Hawks Pokemon Nest. Excited today to get into our deck. It is going to be Wigglytuff EX. This one took me a lot of working, a lot of tinkering. It took me a few weeks to get this right, but I finally have a serviceable deck. So what we're going to do is get into each card in the deck, why it's included, what it does. Then we're going to go over the strategy of the deck, how to play it, what we want to do, talk about some of the strengths and weaknesses of the Wigglytuff deck, and then we will end with some other cards to consider swapping in or out of the deck. Well, without further ado, let's get into what we came to do. Let's get into the Pokemon in the deck, and we'll start with, of course, who the deck is built around. We have our Wigglytuff EX. As a Stage 1 Pokemon, it has 250 HP, which is a solid amount, but really, it has more, because let's look at its expanding body ability, which gives it 100 extra HP if it has a special energy attached. So if we get that, it can get up to a nice beefy 350 HP, so kind of hard to knock this bad boy out, right? And then its ability, Friend Tackle, or not ability, sorry, more so its attack, Friend Tackle, is going to do 90 damage, but if you played a supporter card, it will do 90 more damage. So this is really, to be honest, what makes this deck very difficult to build around, because it's weak. I mean, there's no other way to say it. It's a very soft-hitting ability. This is why it took me a few weeks to build this deck and make it respectable and at least playable. I meant to release this last week. However, I just couldn't get it right quite yet, so I had to move on to my next one and come back to this one. So that means that we need to be using a supporter card in order to get this attack to be doing 180 damage, which for the most part is going to knock out your opponent in 2 turns. However, if you aren't able to get that supporter card, it can take you 3 or even 4 turns to knock your opponent out. So it means that we really need to get supporters in hand, and supporters that we are able to play every turn, not just like a boss's orders to boss up another Pokemon when you're just going to put their Pokemon with damage on the bench. So it's very important to do that on that. But in that, it is a very defensive deck, because expanding body with the 300 HP means that this Pokemon can be hard to knock out. At the same time, it can be a little bit difficult to get ready to go because of needing 3 energy. We'll talk about as we go through how I kind of solve those issues. So first off, let's go through the rest of the Pokemon. We have our Radiant Greninja. This will be our draw engine. And again, it is a tricky draw engine. I did try it with, rather than Greninja, I tried out maybe going with the Bidoof and Bibarel. Didn't quite work. It just wasn't consistent enough. So Radiant Greninja seems to work, and it'll do, right? And then Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon. Now this is really one that finally made this deck start to work for a few reasons, right? I chose this one for its Cornerstone stance. So prevent all damage from attacks done to this Pokemon by your opponent's Pokemon that has an ability. Right, so with that, considering that this is a defensive deck, and considering that sometimes it can take a little bit of time to get my Wigglytuffs ready, I may see if my opponent's attackers have abilities, which is pretty common nowadays. You know, we're seeing still a lot of Charizard EXs out there. So I chose that one to kind of let this guy go into the active and just hang out there for a while until Wigglytuff's ready to go, right? And I mean, in a pinch, I can use Demolish, which is going to do 140 regardless of weakness, resistance, or effects from their active Pokemon. So even weaker potentially than Wigglytuff, but it'll get the job done. You can deal some damage at the very least, but really we want this guy as a support. You kind of want it to sit on the bench for Hoothoot and Noctowl, right? Because we do need a Terra Pokemon here. Now, let's talk about Hoothoot for a second. Of course, we're not going to be attacking with Hoothoot, so it's not necessarily super important on which one you decide to throw in there, but I went with the Astral Radiance one for its Stand Sentry move. So basic energy attached to your bench Pokemon can't be discarded by effects of your opponent's item or supporter cards. So it's a little bit of a catch-22 because at first, I kind of thought, oh yeah, well you can't discard. I'll protect my special energy, my double turbos and stuff. It does say basic energy, but I still think it's good because we are still putting some energy on, and considering the cost of attacking for Wigglytuff, if your opponent throws out a crushing hammer or something like that, you are protected. Again, this is just kind of a bonus. This deck's not built around it. It's probably never going to be used or come in handy, but that one time you need it, it will. Anyway, really what we want to do is get our Cornerstone mask on bench fast enough so that we can evolve to Noctowl, so that we can use Jewel Seeker. Now, when we evolve him, as long as we have a Terra Pokemon, so as long as our Cornerstone mask is on bench or inactive, then we can search our deck for up to 2 trainer cards, put them in our hand, shuffle our deck. The cool thing is they can be any trainer cards. They don't just have to be supporters, so you can grab item cards or stadiums or things of the like. But what I really find they help me out with is making sure I have supporters so that my Wigglytuff is able to attack. So that's, I think, is very important there, right? So that's what I use it for. Then Jigglypuff. Again, here we have a few options at which Jigglypuff we want to choose. I went with this one. For one, it has 70 HP, so just a little bit higher than some. I mean, I think most of them have 70, if not all, to be honest. But I really like its lead ability. Remember, we want to get supporter cards, so if we somehow get our Jigglypuff stuck in the active, we've got an energy on it, then we can use lead, search for a supporter card, reveal it, put it into our hand. So let's say we go second, Jigglypuff inactive, throw an energy on it, use lead, and then you can evolve and have a good supporter for next turn to use. And I mean, just in general, you want supporters in hand, even if you don't have your Wigglytuff ready. I didn't even consider the fact that it has one of the funniest attacks in the game of Stompy Stomp. So that one's funny. Also, with Gyarados, the Magikarp has what, Splishy Splash. So those are just great attacking games. I mean, we can't go wrong with that. Anyway, let's get into some of the supporters. Supporters are another thing I've really tinkered with here. I feel like I need a lot of different types of supporters, but I also want to keep this deck as consistent as possible. Supporters and trainers, really for that like. So I went Buddy Poffin is always the classic one to go first with. I've got 3 of those in there. Seems to be okay. Seems to get me what I need for the most part. Energy Lotto's the one that I put 4 in here. I do think we need 4 because we're trying to find double turbo energy. And the other special energy I play is a Jet Energy, which can help serve as a switch card and, of course, another special energy. All right, so we want to get 4 of those so that we can try to find them as quickly as possible. Nest Ball, got 3 Nest Balls in there. We want the Nest Ball so that we can get our Cornerstone mask, so that we can get our Radiant Greninja out there, and of course in a pinch we can grab a Hoothoot or a Jigglypuff if we need so, right? Night Stretcher. The Night Stretchers, for the most part, I'm using to pull back my basic energies so that I can just continue to use the draw engine, or of course I'm going to attach one if I really need to. But we're only going to play a total of 4 basic energies, and then we've got 6 of these specials. So it does make this card a little bit more tricky, but I just think it still works because a lot of times, like I said, I'm using it to pull back energy and just use those energy immediately to continue to draw. Ultra Ball, 3 Ultra Balls in there. Of course, we want to be able to grab our Wigglytuff EX. That's really our only non-basic in this deck, but maybe we're going to use it to grab a Greninja or something like that too. Right. Area 0 Underdepths. This one just helps us not have to make decisions on bench. That was another issue I was encountering a lot with this deck, was just like filling up my bench too fast and then like not being able to continue to use things. You know, we always want an extra Jigglypuff there. We want a Greninja. We want Hoots, and that's almost going to fill it up with just a few of those. So helping us being able to make sure that you throw your Ogerpon on there before you're going to fill up your bench, and then you can have up to 8, and then you're pretty much good to go, right? Boss's Orders. 3 Boss's Orders in here. Not much to say. Now the Carmine, this one is... Do I really need it? To be honest, I would like to have more of these. But so far, this was one of the last cards I threw in the deck, in fact. And hey, I've already gotten it turn 1 a few times and been able to discard. So as we see here, if you go first, you can use the card. You discard your hand and draw 5 cards. So it helps you get out of a good hand. I only have 1 because I just can't fit any more of them. I just don't feel like I can. So it's almost like a squawkabilly without it being a squawk, where you just kind of hope to get it. I mean, of course, I don't have ways of doing so. But, you know, hey, look, no more to say about it. It is what it is. It's in there. Cool. Then I've got Crispin. I've got 3 of them in there. We get to search for 2 basic energies, 1 in hand, 1 to a Pokemon. So this can help us be able to just get our Wigglytuffs going quicker, because in essence it lets us attach 2 per turn. Sometimes you may use it to attach 1 and use your Radiant Greninja with the other. Iono. Everybody needs Iono in their deck. Not everybody, but this deck especially. This deck has a tendency of getting handlocked sometimes with all of the random stuff in there. We may have, maybe we already have our Cornerstone mask in Area 0, and our hand is full of freaking other stuff like that. Iono is good, and of course, on your opponent, if we're falling behind, we can try to handlock them. Right? Kieran, this one is a card. As people who watch my videos see this card used a lot. This one's good, I think, for a few reasons. It can act as a switch card, of course, to get our Wigglytuff up there. But I think it's especially useful in this deck because it acts as the supporter card to boost Wigglytuff's attack already. And then we can do 30 more damage. So now we go from 180 to 210. And that can actually help us knock out quite a few EXs out there. It is unfortunate that it's a supporter, because I find myself wishing I could boss up a 210 and then use Kieran, which I can, obviously. But this one's a good card if they do have one of those 210 hitters up there. But at the very least, we're able to just go ahead and hit them for 210, because Kieran acted as the supporter necessary to get Wigglytuff's attack higher. Now, the A-Spec, what a fun A-Spec when we have a 350 HP Wigglytuff to throw on a Hero's Cape and get it to 450. Like, woohoo, we doing some defense now. Sometimes this is going to help us take multiple turns before our opponent can knock us out. And I'm talking about 3 turns with its 450 HP now. The downside of this is I really couldn't figure out a way of consistently pulling the card. You know, we don't have any Arvins or things like that, considering it's the only tool we have. I'm not playing any Arvins at all, so you kind of have to rely on just drawing the card for the most part. But, I mean, you can pull it with your Hoothoot, so actually not. I don't know why. I don't think I've ever had to pull it. Anyway, energy time. Energy, energy, energy. We have double turbo energy, helping us have 2 energy, and then 20 less damage, which is very unfortunate on our already weak Wigglytuff. Like, for example, if you use a Kieran, now that 180 goes to 160 plus 30 is only 190. But again, I think we need that speed. We need that speed because 3 energy just takes way too long to load up. So if you can throw a double turbo on your Wigglytuff, at least in the beginning, you know, maybe try to load one up later, that's okay. Alright, then we have a Jet Energy, which can act as both a switch card and a special energy on our Wigglytuff. I find myself using this one a lot if I'm going to attach 2. And then, you know, my Wigglytuff inactive starting to get a little bit beat up. Hey, good switch card. Or if you get stuck early and then you want to kind of think about using it as a switch to get whatever you got stuck with to start the game, you can use that. Whatever you want to do. Look, Jet Energy. Now from there, I've got 2 fighting, 2 waters. I kind of wish, like, I've really tried other ways of getting me to 3 of each. Then that would give me 12 total energy, but then I've a lot of times get stuck with too many energy in hand. You could consider taking out a few cards. I don't know what though. This is a very tough one. So let me know in the comments what you think of this list. Of course, the entire list is going to be in the video description. This one I think could still use a lot of tinkering in terms of the deck list. So like I said, let me know. But let's talk about some of these strategy strengths and weaknesses next. Rather simple strategy for this deck. We want to load up that bench, get as many Hoothoots as you can out there, get as many Jigglypuffs on bench, and then of course get your Ogerpon and get your Radiant Greninja. So load up that bench and then focus on getting special energy attached to your Wigglytuffs or Jigglypuffs if they're not evolved yet. So we want to get those so that we make sure that they get that extra 100 HP, and of course while getting them ready to deal some damage. And then our next focus is getting supporters in hand. So doing that by just drawing and of course evolving those Hootoots into Noctowls. So for the most part, cross your fingers that you can get both supporters. But at the worst case scenario, you may even grab things like our energy Loto so that we can continue to find those double turbo energies or jet energies, whatever special energies we need. Strengths and weaknesses of the deck. First off, in terms of strength, Wigglytuff is tough, right? This is a Pokemon that as a stage 1 can get between 350 and 450 maximum HP, which is pretty good. Your opponent is going to struggle to knock it out. It's rarely going to get one-shotted, so that is pretty nice there. Very tough. And then Jewel Seeker is just a really good pair for this. I think as I of course have been messing with this deck for quite some time, I think that if we didn't have Jewel Seeker, then this deck would probably not be viable because we wouldn't be able to consistently get support in hand to make sure that we can do 90 more damage. All the HP in the world is not going to help you when you're only hitting for 90 damage. Like, okay, it's going to take them 4 turns, it's going to take you 4 turns. Thinking about, in 3 turns we would deal 270 damage if we can't get a supporter. That is terrible. This Wigglytuff's going to get knocked out. So Jewel Seeker really helps us to get those supporters in hand. And then our Ogerpon versus abilities, that again can help you to stall out to get your Wigglytuff ready, or in decks where their attackers have abilities, then we're good to go, right? Weaknesses though, a lot needs to work, right? A lot needs to work. We need to get our Wigglytuff with the special energy. We need to get supporters in hand. So it can be a challenge to get this deck to work. One of the biggest issues I've found is that you can get hand locked while you're trying to find that. I have done my best, and I think that this deck's gotten a lot more consistent as I've messed with it. Now having most of our trainers and Pokemon having 3 or more copies of them, but I did have iterations where I was running 2 copies of a card, and it really can just give you a hodgepodge hand sometimes that really just hand locks you. And that still can happen, although like I said, I think it's gotten a lot better against it, right? Wigglytuff being tough, it can hit very soft, and to be honest, even when we're using a supporter, 180 damage is not a lot, so we're not going to one-shot pretty much anything. But all things considered, it can usually 2-shot things. Remember that with a double turbo, we're often only going to be hitting for 160, which means that in 2 turns we're going to hit for 320. That means that we're not going to be able to even take 2-shot Pokemon like Charizard EX or other big dogs like that. So that can be very challenging when you face those. So in matchups like that, you might want to swap out and throw in your Ogerpon instead. But overall, that we're dealing with those problems. I think you're gonna be okay. Other cards to consider. This might be my largest list I ever make of other cards to consider, and it's potentially because I tried out so many things. But thinking about other mechanics with Pokemon in here, Balloon Therapy with Wigglytuff was one that I did have for quite some time, and it's a good one because once during your turn you can attach a therapeutic energy to one of your Pokemon, so it helps you get 2 energy attached per turn if you have a medical in hand. However, I was finding that number 1, I usually want those Jigglypuffs to evolve into the Wigglytuff EX. Number 2, it's just kind of wasting space. It's another 2 cards that don't do a lot other than that. And number 3, medical energy, or therapeutic energy, sorry, is good, but not that good. So I just removed it in there. Right now, next up we've got Lumineon V. I thought this one might be good considering the fact that a lot of times we're getting hand locked. So Lumineon helps us to grab the cards that we need. Of course, I'm throwing that one in, and we'll skip to a second to our trainers with the Forest Seal Stone, so that we're able to throw on the stone and grab what we need. Again, the only way to reliably grab the Forest Steel Stone, though, is going to be with our Noctowl when it gets evolved, and I feel like at this point, is it really necessary? So I decided to opt out of the Lumineon V with the stone. This one is one I tried very early on too, considering the Wigglytuff needs special energy. Well, shoot, let's try to get a Lugia V-Star in there, and Archeops on there. But I'm like, okay, if I'm going to throw a Lugia V-Star with special energy, Lugia V-Star itself is a much better attacker than Wigglytuff, so you may as well just build a Lugia V-Star deck and get rid of the Wigglytuff. That's what I found, so I opted out of that one too, right? So unfortunate that we couldn't quite make it work. Again, it's kind of a similar issue too, where you've got a Wigglytuff, you've got a Greninja, you've got 2 Archeops, you've got a Lugia. It takes too long to work. You just opt for only the Lugia. All right, let's get into some of the trainers in there. Something to think about would be a TM Devolution with our Wigglytuffs hitting for so softly. Maybe we start just bossing up, getting a couple damage, and then we just devolve them and take some easy, cheap prize cards from there. I didn't get that one in there. Glass Trumpet's an interesting one. If we didn't need so many special energy, I think this one would be a better card, because you can use it if you have Terra Pokemon, and we can choose to bench the basic or colorless Pokemon and attach an energy from our discard to them. So that, in theory, works well with Wigglytuff being one. But, again, we're not using a ton of basic energy, and it needs, Wigglytuff needs special energy. And then a lot of times I want to Night Stretcher the few basic energies we have and continuously loop them with our Radiant Greninja. So I opt out of that one. Now, Rigid Band is actually one I would love to incorporate in there, but I just can't find the space for it. Remember, our Wigglytuff it got 350 HP. You throw on a Rigid Band and have it take 30 less damage from there. It sounds pretty nice. But again, I just can't fit it in to the deck. Let me know in the comments if you could figure out a way to get that Rigid Band in. I mean, maybe I could go down to 2 of a few cards. It could be pretty good though. Again, Max Belt, kind of solving the other problem of hitting weakly. We would do 50 more damage to active EXs. Again, I just think, hey, let's play defense here. Let's give the 100 extra HP rather than 50 extra per turn. There's some give and take. I mean, it could allow you, even with the double turbo energy, now we can at least get 2 turns to KO a Charizard EX, but it's really not going to help us one-shot anything for the most part. I mean, maybe if you combine Max Belt with the Kieran, now we can do something like between 240 and 260 a turn. I just don't think it's good. Now, here's a good one too. Pal Pad is shuffling supporter cards back into the deck because, we might need those. And you know what too, I actually meant to add, but I do not have, is the Pokegear, right? Pokegear is one that would be good. Needs a little accent, that's why. Let's put gear. So Pokegear 3.0 is looking at the top, reveal a supporter card, put it into your hand. This one actually is one that would be really good to incorporate into the deck, considering we need to be using supporters every turn. Another one, I don't know how to get it in there, so let me know in the comments. I think some of these cards could really help the deck, but also take away from some of the consistency of what I have built in there now. But maybe I should eliminate some of the cards I have. Kieran is kind of a debatable card already. Let me know where we're at, but you know, hey, that's pretty much where we're at with the deck. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Hawks Pokemon Nest. Thank you for joining. Thank you for tuning in to our wild Wigglytuff deck. We're going to take it into action for our Friday release this week, so make sure that you tune in for that. For now, though, please hit that subscribe button if you liked what you saw. You can become part of the Hawks Nest. We are a fearless flock of fabulous folks who love to do what they love. I love to just come out here and build these crazy rogue decks. Excited to see what we're going to do as we get closer to the rotation, and it's going to change a lot of things. I may go back and redo some of these older decks along that kind of have stuff post-rotation, and of course we will be getting some new decks in there too. I always prefer as much as possible to get some new stuff. If you're not quite ready to fly yet though, just hit that like button. We'll see you again in an algorithm near you, but until then, we'll go ahead and see you next time.